Of course,
You're
it
live.
reloaded the moment it started. That's some sort of weird
All right,
setting.
dude. What is this? Oh, I've seen this before.
Apparently, I dumped my quality up one notch too far. Let's go down one notch of quality.
Dude, we don't want to miss this.
No, but you have to have the right
Not
quality
wanna
for it
miss
to
this.
stream with everything we're doing. Isn't that crazy?
You just got to make sure those saws are going fast enough to get the job done, right?
Yeah, I was just thinking, what about the fifth time through? I'm like, what if he got hung up? Like, what would he do?
Well,
There's probably
so
just drop the saw and go land and
cutting
call a
these
truck
back
out.
from the power lines. Then is that right? So
Yeah.
I think so. Looks like it.
Wow. So one slip and you've got the power lines too.
Right.
Well, I think he's a little further from the power lines than you would think, but yes.
Yeah, and he's probably got, he knows his like swing pendulum, but still
Sure.
he's got to hit those blades fast enough to cut through wood. Marty, how's your back? Dude, my whole system is like I've been in a freaking 15-round fight today. I'm good. Feeling, full of post-workout energy because I've been out there since then. It had never stopped snowing, so we're rocking. Thanks to everybody who watched that this afternoon. Are we gonna go? Are we coming in? You're beat up in Denver? Yeah, I hear you, brother. Is it still snowing in Denver right now? It's pounding us up here in Boulder. There we go. Is he landing it now?
Yeah. That was him landing. I think this is another guy cutting.
Just lighten up a bit. Yeah, it's about supposed to here.
Somebody told me they'd seen this being done. I was like, I would have had to stop and watch.
You also have to have that thing heavy enough to not go sideways with the wind, right?
I think it's on a pole too. That's not a cable, it's a pole.
Okay.
It's a pole.
I think it's a pole with a pivot at the helicopter, pivot at the saw, so that it doesn't rotate. Because you can't have it rotating, right? You need the blade forward.
Right.
We'll get to this in a second. We want to welcome a new guest tonight. His name is Dave, and he is a friend of the show, but he's decided to jump on tonight. I'm going to let Jeff introduce. Jeff, how you doing? First of all, brother.
I'm good.
Let me get rid of this thing. Hold on. It's good, but we may need some snow plows, man. I may personally need some snow plows.
I didn't know if snow plows again would be too on the nose with you shoveling snow.
Did you think
all
I'd
day.
get triggered? It would be my trigger.
Yeah, I thought you might be like
PTSD tonight.
Can't do
That's
it,
right.
man.
That's right. My back.
Been in the
Watching
shit.
all that snow. Yeah, I did.
Yeah, no.
There are some really cool snow removal videos where like guys take these huge saws and they cut their square into these like refrigerator-sized pieces and slide them off the side. But I noticed places apparently that get that much snow, they seem to have a lot of steel roofs instead of asphalt shingles, so they can slide it off the
snow
steel.
today. I was thinking about like up in Estes Park where you've got the old really really pitched roofs up there, and I was thinking about that today. I was like, this is why they do that.
That's the way to do it. Is high pitched roof. Although I watched another video from Alaska where they're trying to clear one of those, and these two guys jump on this snow for like half an hour, and it finally comes down. Apparently, you either want to stay on the roof or come down with the snow. You don't want the snow to go down and then you come down. Just FYI, that was discussed in several of the videos. There's even a video where a guy like is on the roof by himself as the snow leaves, and he like jumps on it so he can ride it down instead of falling maybe by himself. Thought that was very interesting also.
Yeah, I suppose you'd want to go with the mass.
Yeah, I mean, you either go with it. Yeah.
It's still going to hurt.
Better than the snow and going down and then you slip and fall on your own.
I mean, that snow I pulled off my roof today, when I finally moved it, when I was done, it was so packed, so hard, I could hardly chip it out of there.
Oh yeah, because you've pitched it down from the roof and then it
was all wet.
Wow.
You flipped the wet part on top and then it hit the ground and probably started to freeze.
Yep. So it was a lot of fun. Whole bunch of fun, about 3 times. So
yeah, that sounds really amazing. I wish I could be doing that.
Well, I periscoped it. I thought, man, and 52 people watched it. So thanks to all of those people who watched some idiot out in his yard with a shovel. My favorite was Mike, who's in Buffalo, was just like, how in the hell do you not have a snowblower? And I was like, I know, man. I know.
Yeah. Yeah, I told you I have an electric snowblower because
Part of it's because I got everything else.
Snow, yeah.
Too much other shit to fit it in my garage. That's probably part of the problem.
I have a red tile roof, so when it starts to thaw, it like a whole run from the edge to the top will come down at once, either one section or 4 or 5 sections, and it just comes down, hits the ground. What's a snowblower?
Zach from California, who's like, is that like a leaf blower? Yeah, dude, it's just like a leaf blower.
Mr. Clean is Zach, yeah,
with teeth.
Yeah, it's like a lawnmower, but for snow. How's that?
Well, so anyway, welcome, Dave. When we started this show, we did it. This is our 25th episode, so I'm glad you're with us tonight. And when we started this show, it was a attempt to move the debate past the whiplash that happened in some of the Periscope software, with some of the ways it worked, where when a phone call comes in on that software, it really dominates the conversation in a way by the volume, plus some of the comments just whiplash a person. So with this software, we're able to kind of just hold what we wanted to talk about a little bit easier and still allow all the comments to whip us around it when they need to. But the audio call-in feature doesn't work in this. I didn't know that when we started that either. So, but I'm glad we made it together on this, and I welcome you to this time. What we want to do in this place is talk about core political discourse. We really, and I admit I have gone down the wayside of the hottest issue of the day several times. Sometimes that's because we're not able to do what we're able to do tonight. So I'm glad you're with us. Really honored that you're with us, because I've been looking for somebody with the courage to say, hey, I don't agree with you, everything you guys say, and let's get it on. And so I appreciate you being here.
Well, I appreciate you letting me be here.
Yeah.
So I can't wait for the conversation. So I guess, my name's Dave. I'm in Wichita. I am a practical libertarian, moderate libertarian. So I can't wait for the conversation. Let's see what we got.
Awesome. And Jeff, how you doing, man? Any lighting issues tonight? Any of your crazy, production stuff going on over there?
Production stuff?
Your lighting.
Oh, like when my shirt was blue but appeared green?
Yeah, I still can't figure that one out.
I don't know anything about it. I went back to dark shirts to just avoid that problem. Everything's been good here today. I took the pedals off my 5-year-old's bike to try and get him to kind of learn from I don't know if you've ever done that. You take the pedals off so they can use it like a balance bike, and he did that for a few minutes. Need to get him to a street fair or something where he has to do it for hours, and that's how my daughter learned to ride was pedaling a real bike, balance bike style. So we did some of that this afternoon. Got outside. It was nice. It was like mid-60s here. So we got some rain yesterday. We're getting rain tomorrow, but somehow whatever you're getting must not be coming straight our way like normal.
Still sitting there.
Yeah, it is probably still sitting there, just circling. I remember one Christmas, a storm came in, as I recall, from Colorado to Kansas City, and then turned around and went back to Colorado. I'd never seen anything like it. My dad was in Kansas City. He was ahead of it on the way in. It followed him in, and then it turned around and went back.
Wow.
It's like that's pretty unique. I had never seen a storm move northwest, but it sure did. That was probably 2006 or something. Anyway, no, everything's hunky dory on this end. Nicer weather here for us. It feels like spring for sure. It'll snap back and have some freezing days, I'm sure, but it's been real nice for a few days here in Wichita. Right. Besides the earthquakes, which
besides the earthquakes, we had 4 earthquakes, I believe, over 3.0. Last one was 3.9, I think. My daughter was out on the swing, and so she didn't feel anything.
Oh, wow.
Because she was on the swing, she was free floating there. But she said she saw the house sway. And so I ran outside. First thing I thought was, she's 6 years old, so she got freaked out by the earthquakes this morning. So I ran outside to make sure she was okay and calm. And before I said anything, she said, I didn't feel anything. So she knew something had happened, but she didn't feel a thing because she was on that swing. But that was interesting.
I was outside for that one, and that was the first earthquake I've been outside for. And we were talking about this again before. There was this loud boom, like a tanker exploded 2 miles away, and then the shake came through the ground. So that was a unique experience. You kind of can hear it rumble sometimes before you feel it, but being outside, the boom was very loud.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very interesting. There's no fracking around Wichita. Fracking's been outlawed in the state for what, 3-4 years, Dave? I don't even know.
Yeah, about 4
But
years.
something's definitely shifting. I mean,
well, there is a fault under Wichita, which I didn't know until recently, but for whatever reason, it's becoming active since Thanksgiving. And so,
you had days with 5 or 6. Didn't we have a day or 2 with 5 or 6 where
there was one Saturday that we had, I think it was up to 7.
I think you're right.
I lived in Burbank for a while, and I never experienced an earthquake out there. But I always joked with people that, I left the tornadoes to come to the earthquakes. And so now I'm getting both.
Now you're getting both.
I need to go back to the beach.
Seriously. And so because you lived in California and I lived there for a time too, you always had to learn how to affix things to the walls. For people in Wichita and, I suppose Oklahoma and other places in Colorado too, are they beginning to do that?
We're gonna have to adopt that method. Yeah.
So far, these earthquakes, I mean, even though the numbers get big, they dissipate really quickly. Like the other side of town won't even feel them, which is a more sandy soil as you go west in town. And nothing's like fallen in my house. Like not one thing is fallen. So like they're not so violent that things fall. I mean, the example I've said before is it's like a super heavy tractor trailer goes down your street at like 90.
Right.
Like they're not like jarring, but I mean, it's definitely a shaking. If you've ever had someone like using a trenching tool to put in like a sprinkler system or something, where sometimes they'll hit a hard part of soil and you can kind of feel it through your house. They're kind of just like that. They're not real jarring, but it's definitely not fun.
It's happening.
It is happening. It's happening. And I've been in the basement here before when it comes, and it's like a wave. You can feel the wave come through the ground. Like you hear it rumbling on one side and then it flies by you. It's pretty crazy. Definitely San Andreas, Wichita edition is correct. We need to make a movie with The Rock saving Dave and I from magma flows or whatever was in that movie.
Right.
Wichita edition,
San Andreas.
It'd be a different style of game, but it would be a very interesting game to see a GTA Kansas edition.
The New Madrid fault, or as everyone else would call it, the New Madrid fault, but the New Madrid fault is overdue too in Missouri. The last time it went, it caused some pretty serious issues. The Mississippi River flowed backwards for a day or something. It created a lake.
That thing's overdue. That thing will do that, right?
One of the biggest earthquakes this country's ever had was that one in Missouri. It was 110 years ago, 120, something like that.
They felt it, states away.
Right. All right. So let's go. Let's do it. Dave is here. Jeff is here. And I don't know. Jeff and I don't agree on everything either. Let's start from the foundation of this show, at least. When Jeff and I were kind of kicking around this show, one of the first couple of episodes was epistemology, the idea of learning where the idea comes from. Coming to that core, where the heck did all of these strains of thought sort of pull out of. And I have a hunch that all of us are fairly close to growing up in the Reagan 80s and can remember the ramifications of learning about economics and political life after and during the 80s. And there is, I think, one of the dividing lines in our politic in this country is around what is often called the 9 words. And I don't know if I can get the words right exactly with the 9 of them, but they are these. The worst thing you can hear is that I'm here from the federal government and I'm here to help. And Ronald Reagan made those words famous. He made them a foundational element of his economic approach, his adoption of various laissez-faire economic approaches, but also regulatory approaches. And those were remarkable capitalist, laissez-faire, sort of true conservative, in my opinion, sort of real red conservative ideals that have carried along. But I think where I want to go tonight is to see where we are in that question. Is that bad news, Dave and Jeff, when the federal government shows up to help? And where's that line around how we approach governance, especially federal governance? And I'll just kind of kick it off there. Is that fair?
I think it's fair.
Fair enough.
Cool.
Dave, do you have any initial thoughts?
Well, absolutely, yeah. So, I mean, we live in a federation basically, a federation of states. That's at least how it was intended originally. The federal government has grown to a point where there's definitely certain rights that you know from state to state that you're going to have, but it was designed really to have several different petri dishes or experiments that in governance, in schools, and so many other things. And the idea was that those that were more successful would then be copied. Whereas if the government is top down, if it fails from the top, everybody's going to fail. And so, at least on your question about, do I think when the federal government shows up, are we in trouble? No, not necessarily. Again, I'm a practical libertarian. I do recognize the need for a federal government, but I would like to have as little of it as possible to solve the problem, whatever solution we need.
Do you find yourself finding that dividing line between you and other conservative friends or other people that you might be in political discourse with, that's a place that they go? Because it seems that there is from the Hannity right a hard, real just rebuttal and repugnancy towards anyone who's approaching a pro-federal program at any level, essentially. Trump sort of, it seemed like Trump made them able to swallow the pill a little bit easier, but they were still waiting for the day they could say, the sky is falling, let's pay the bill.
Yeah. So when you start getting into the Hannity Republicans or the MAGA Republicans, there's a real hypocrisy a lot of times where they hate the federal government in some things, but they love it in others. And so I've never really been able to trust what a Republican says about, I don't want big government, because they do. They want just as big a government as the Democrats do. They just want it in a different realm, in a different aspect. So they would love to tell you what to do in your own home. They would love to tell you who you can marry and those types of things. But when it comes to helping someone else out with their money, that's where they draw the line on government. And so they're big government people, but they don't recognize that in themselves. Now, in my libertarian circles, and I mean libertarian big L, like the actual party.
And yes, yeah.
We definitely get the extremes. And minarchists, and if you're not familiar with that term, they're basically anarchists with a very, very minimal government. And that seems to be what gets attracted to the Libertarian Party itself. As for me,
are you in that camp at all?
I'm not. I'm not. I'm very moderate. I hold to the libertarian philosophy in the sense that any given issue that you bring to me, whatever government level we have in that, I think we could probably have a little less. And I just kind of keep it at that. I can get more specific on the different issues, but just as a general answer, that's going to be my answer.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of from my point of view as a liberal, my concern as you get more into states controlling more things is you could end up in a situation where let's just avoid the absolute hot button one and just go to the second hot button, which is guns. You could live in one state where you're allowed to buy, own anything, not register anything, and then 2 states over. To buy any gun, you have to have a license, or whole categories of guns are banned. And so, to me, when states make some of those type decisions, you could end up in a situation where, especially as your views differ from the state you're in, the populace of the state you're in, your rights could vary dramatically just based purely on your geography. So to me, at some point, the federal government helps operate, even when they're into minutia issues that we would probably all agree they shouldn't be. They kind of sometimes have to step into those issues, or else, a liberal in Texas is going to feel persecuted, and a conservative in Vermont is going to feel persecuted. You have to have some common thread of these are the bumpers on these issues of what what the sort of minimum and maximums are, and the states can do little adjustments in the middle. But you can't just as a state decide you're going to outlaw guns, or in a state demand everyone own a gun. You need some federal guardrails to keep the states from ping ponging into crazy aspects. And another example is here in Kansas, there's actually an anti-EPA organization that I see at the state fair, and it always kind of makes my jaw drop. I understand the EPA can cause problems, like calling your back 40 a wetlands and now you can't farm anymore. I get that. But on the other hand, Detroit Harbor once caught fire. So, we have to have some balance of, capitalism will fix it all, which I don't believe is true at all. And of course, the government nerfing everything, and you can't put a shovel in the ground because it violates some ecosystem. So, there definitely has to be a balance of those things. And as much as it's plausible, to me, the federal government is a decent modus for that, a decent operative force in keeping some form of sanity across any political range, because again, even though Kansas is a red state, this last time they voted 45% for 45. Biden. So we're not all, just because the majority are conservative doesn't make all of us conservative. So I don't think it makes a lot of sense, for the will of the majority to just, dominate everyone. And that would of course be conversely true in, say, California or a liberal state. So it's definitely a balancing act of what states should control and what the federal government should control.
You're right. And, before the Bill of Rights, because people think of the Bill of Rights as being, an immediate part of the Constitution. There was a few years in between there, but the states came to the federal government and they said, basically what you're saying is that we can't have all of something in one state and none of something in the other state. We've got to have some semblance of consistency there. And so that's where the Bill of Rights came from, is Congress went back to that and said, okay, we'll line these out and set some sort of standard. And from there, the states can take it. And as far as, from one state to another, have you ever been to St. Louis? Either one of you?
Yes.
Have you gone up on the arch and looked one way and the other way? One way is Illinois, and there's nothing there. And then the other way is St. Louis. And as far as guns are concerned, in Missouri, conceal carry without a license, right? So you don't even need to tell the government that you're going to run around with a gun. In Illinois, you have to have a license just to own a gun. Own a gun at your home. And so if you are a gun owner, the onus is on you to know the laws and know where you are. Any gun owner, any concealed carry holder in St. Louis knows they can't cross the river unless they go home and put their gun up first. And so when it comes to that stuff, there is going to be some form of freedom versus responsibility. You've got the responsibility, if you have that freedom, to know the laws and comply.
So the federal system trying to mandate a behavior change or something like that, or a behavior pattern that's steady. As a libertarian, is there no value in that? Is there some value in that? I mean, I look at Hamilton's wish that we didn't have a bunch of states that turned into European countries that ended up fighting on the same continent for years and years and years. And I think we've done a pretty good job economically of holding that line. We might have social battles that are going to go on forever, but in terms of our economics, we're one. But in terms of like weed laws, for instance, whether it's guns or weed laws or what it is, it depends on the state you're in, and it depends on we're in the, it's and it also, I'm going to throw this in there too. It also feels like we've creating a culture of scofflawing, which happened around the 20s, or around Prohibition, and scofflawing became a major problem just because people started acting like shitheads and didn't, the law became a secondary thing. Corruption was just a normal deal. And so I don't know, I'm just putting some stuff on the table there because what I like what you're saying about I like what you're saying about knowing where you are, but I really, as a gun owner, or a whatever owner, don't want to have to keep track.
There's few things that are that extreme. There's few things that you really would have to keeps such a close track on. Guns are one of them, and I think I'm sure you imagine I'm a very big proponent of the Second Amendment,
Okay.
but I'm also a big proponent of understanding that heavy responsibility and complying with what you need to. And if you don't know that you can't run around in Illinois with a gun, you should have you should have paid a little closer attention. Um,
Where's the line
that's
comfortable for you? I'm just going to pick on you because you're a libertarian,
sure.
and I think you're pretty aware of where your line is. Where's the line where it's too much? How do I even say it? Where would it be a line if you're in Kansas? Where's a line for too much Kansas intervention in how you report and carry? You say that you're for common sense stuff, but like, where's that line for a libertarian? Because I think a lot of liberals think that it's a black and white issue.
Yeah, so I'm not really sure if I'm following the question, but I can tie it into an earlier question that you asked.
Go for it.
Because you mentioned, do I see any value in the federal government kind of trying to create some kind of consistency across the board? And of course there is. I mean, technically a state could come out tomorrow and say, well, we're going to let murder be legal as long as you do it in certain areas. And of course the Supreme Court is going to strike that law down because that's an ascribed right. And so there is some value. There's a lot of value actually in the federal government being able to look at a law, decide whether it's constitutional or not. And there's a process for that. And it was set up, a long time ago. So I think the line is there. I think, if a state crosses what some people think should be the line, then we challenge it. And the challenge goes through the system. If it gets shot down, it wasn't constitutional. If it stays, well, then we got to deal with it.
Makes sense.
In the abortion question, just to
we went to the number one hot button. Let's skip the hot button first.
I'm just saying because this is a states' rights question because I don't even know what state it is right now that's damn near made it completely illegal. Is it Missouri or?
It's not Missouri.
It's probably Mississippi.
I was going to say it was a southern state. I thought it was anyway. Yeah.
Okay, so just for the theoretical conversation here, if that goes to the Supreme Court, which it most likely will. And they're going to, if it's a true, we are banning this whole thing from our state, if it ever gets to that place.
Right.
I think that the Supreme Court is going to rule against that.
Right. And, what we have set up in our system, that's probably going to be the right decision. The federal government, I don't think should have any place in abortion law. But when it comes to things like a woman's safety, life, death, when it comes to a woman's privacy, then there are constitutional grounds for that. And that's, I was talking about this with a friend recently, there's only two ways that you can look at abortion. Number one, it's an act of violence, and same as murder, rape, or assault, or any of those things. But all acts of violence are legislated at the state level. Or you could look at it as just a medical procedure. And again, all medical procedures are legislated at the state level. And so really the federal government has no business making a law about abortion. What Roe v. Wade did was it approached it from a woman's privacy rights, Fourth Amendment rights, I believe. And so we don't want the federal government at least to be looking into every conversation you have with your doctor and determining whether you're breaking a law or not. I personally, it is really a hot button issue, but personally on abortion at the state, local level, I'm not going to fight most abortion laws. I think anything after the first trimester, I think that's awful. But I'm not really going to fight it. But definitely at the federal level, they have no business being involved in that.
And it's an issue that's incredibly important. But I'm thinking of it just in terms of the legal side of this thing, in terms of let me ask you a different question on the same subject. Do you think it would, as a libertarian, because I kind of consider myself to be a constitutional liberal, believe in our Constitution heavily, but I think that there should be a little more government action than I believe you probably believe. So then we could go down that road for a second.
Sure.
I think some of government has to be wasteful because leadership has to be wasteful at times. And if you don't have a government that's looking at 10 potential options, even though one is probably going to happen, you're not ready to lead. And so sometimes there has to be things that are not very sexy in reporting and make easy fodder for people to go, why are they wasting that money? But there's a lot of different what ifs that can happen, and you need some planning. And so I do believe there needs to be better government. I also think there needs to be reporting in our government. It's actually illegal for a lot of our federal agencies to do any PR or reporting about what they're doing, except for NASA. And I really think that that's part of our disconnect is we don't know what the hell a lot of these little people are out there doing research that's magnificent that a lot of us could support. But we don't even know about it because we can't know about it. And for a lot of reasons, but so back
transparency.
to
transparency is, totally. I mean, that's a big deal. And every single libertarian, moderate or not, is going to agree with you on transparency. And, when you say waste, I think that's inevitable in any type of bureaucracy. But I think you are also going to agree with me that there is too much waste right now. And we're spending ourselves into oblivion here.
It's beyond.
So I think we can find some common ground there.
It's so much money and a reprioritization. I mean, my number one issue, just so you know, I don't know where this fits on the political spectrum, but my number 1,000 issue is money in politics and how it has perverted our system and it doesn't allow for our bureaucracy. That's the thing. We're all talking about bureaucracy, right? We all hate bureaucracy.
Right.
In the theory of our elected bureaucracy or our democratic republic, it's the idea that we can, vote the bureaucracy into place and then boot them out if we don't like them. Whereas when I call Verizon or AT&T, all I can do is sit on hold. I don't have a vote with those people. They're an enormous bureaucracy that's really efficient at what they do. But, that's why I'm not a fascist, because I don't really want to go to my corporate boss and then work up the chain of their private corporation to find power in this world.
Right.
And there are a lot of folks right now who are erring on the side of fascism. Like, you know what? Corporations are much more trustworthy than our government. And that's why I think this is such a critical piece, because it's who and how do we make our decisions in a time where legitimacy is it's a dirty word. Nobody believes, a lot of people don't believe anything. It's a nihilism of systems. So I don't know. I guess back to my question. Sorry for my rant. Do you think it would be better for Roe versus Wade, or do you think it would be better for there to be a congressional act for abortion to be addressed in that system, so that it was a democratically elected congressional act about the question of the right to choose? Or do you think it's a mistake that we're sitting with this Roe versus Wade decision, essentially legislating from the bench, causing this eternal rift in our culture war?
Roe v. Wade happened because of Republicans pushing for, they were at the time pushing for legislation federally on abortion, where at the same time you had this issue in Texas that ended up going all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court may have rejected that had there not been pending legislation in federal Congress. So it was actually the Republicans that pushed it to that point. Do I think Roe v. Wade is a mistake? That's a really tough question to answer.
I'm just speaking like libertarian philosophy, just in terms of garnering that kind of freight from the bench.
Yeah,
is that a way you think we should be working?
I think that for your first question, I don't think we should do legislation at the federal Congress on abortion, whether it's pro-abortion or anti-abortion.
Gotcha.
I do think that states should have those rights, but if states over-legislate, then there should be a way to challenge it, and that's what we have in the Supreme Court, and that's what we've got, with the Roe v. Wade decision. The Roe v. Wade decision, do I support it or not, is irrelevant.
Yeah, that's not the question.
It happened, and it was always going to happen. If it didn't happen because of the Texas case, there would have been some other case that came up. It always would have gone to the Supreme Court at some point, and either the Democrats would have been pushing legislation in federal Congress, or the Republicans would have. In this case, it was Republicans, and eventually it would have happened. So, that's my answer to your question on that. No, I don't want legislation from the federal government.
I appreciate your answer. I was curious. I really was, because I've talked to a lot of conservative friends of mine who were like, "We need to legislate it."
Yeah. Oh, I know. I've been in those circles. That they definitely want it legislated, Republicans, and I've talked to Democrats that want it legislated up there too. And no, it's a mistake. I think the system that is set up now is great, and I do believe that the laws that you were talking about in whichever state, I can't remember which state it is, I do believe that's going to be challenged, and if it goes as far as what it was proposed, it's going to get shot down in the Supreme Court. If it even gets that far, it could just get shot down in that state Supreme Court.
Yeah. Historically, there's been moves. I believe it was last time it was Texas, and I believe they were requiring they kept doing bills that made the rooms bigger as a way to cause a problem. And I think the last thing Texas did was they said you had to have basically a trauma facility in any facility doing abortions. Well, of course, most of these abortion clinics are freestanding, so that they're not under the governance of a hospital and all the bureaucracy. A lot of our hospitals are Catholic systems now. So there was this obstacle that clinics couldn't possibly breach. And so that went up and Texas got thrown out. Yeah, I believe it's either Mississippi. I think someone said in the comments, Mississippi too. It's just like trying to straight up outlaw it. And I think that pretty clearly will be challenged. And just in case people in the comments are confused, we're really trying to get to the basis of libertarian thought, Again,
it's not governance, not about the issue of abortion or any of that.
Matt's doing a good job of we're not trying. We could sit here and argue. I don't even think Matt really would generally disagree, but we could argue with a pro-life person or pro-choice person all night. We're probably not going to make any headway. I did just bring up a poll we had before. CBS, only 24% of Americans think abortion should not be permitted. 31% think it should be available with limits. And 43% think it should be generally available. So 74% of Americans, there's some percentages missing. They must have not answered. But, 75% of people basically feel that there should be some abortion available. So we really don't need to go into all the nuance.
Well, no, I'd kind of like to end it with this in saying, is this now – I mean, a lot of what we're talking about is America broken. And it's broken in various ways. And so the question is the best we can have – on an issue that's as divisive and multi-sided as that issue, Jeff, the poll you just read is essentially America in a long-standing standoff that we're sort of okay with a decision being made in a way that is just somebody made it, and now we move. I mean, culture wars still are red hot around the issue, but isn't that interesting that we just live with that, right?
Right.
In a democratic republic, we're supposed to make decisions and move forward, but we're paralyzed in some of these things. I don't know.
I think there's also just the tacit. What I heard Dave say is we have an equilibrium right now. There's been a Supreme Court case. It leaves it the way it is, and it's been tested a couple of times and seems to have fallen out the way the majority of Americans would want, which, let's be frank, that's really how these decisions are made. I mean, we can talk about political beliefs and everything else, but all these people in decision-making, obviously some things are unconstitutional and they will get kicked out even if they're popular. But I think in this scenario, you have a situation where the court made a decision that was necessary because the prohibition on abortion was very painful, especially for women. So I think, there's like a natural solution that will come when things get too far out of whack. And yes, I think the short answer is abortion, Social Security, these types of issues are used as polarizing battle cry type issues that obviously the Republicans had 2 years of the president and the Congress. If they wanted to pass a federal law banning abortion, they could have. They did not, because I think they clearly know it would be a mistake because of its impact on society. So they just, now that they're not in charge again, now they're going to bring it back up as this key issue, even though they didn't solve it when they had the power, because it's a slippery slope tough issue. I mean, St. Thomas Aquinas said the society has to have abortion because there's more detriment to the society without it. You know, he was a famous Catholic philosopher. So, you know, sometimes there's just things that arbitrarily might make you kind of go, I don't know if I like that. But sometimes in a modern society, you know, you have to be able to account for mistakes and people changing their mind, and, you know, fathers being killed in the street or killed at war or incarcerated, or, you know, there's just a million issues, you know. And again, we don't want to go all the way to the bottom of all that.
Let's turn it to the next issue that at least I've got another one. I know I told you guys you could bring them up, but I'm going to do this one next.
Go for it.
Same group of questions and answers. Move it over to the Green New Deal idea. So on the one hand, with an abortion issue, you have an adaptive change need for certain people to tell other people how they're going to live, right? In that issue, in the abortion issue, man, you start telling an economy how it's going to move forward. You know, Dave, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago about how differences in leadership. Sometimes you have great leaders who extract the greatness out of you and cause you as the follower and participant to grow along the way, and they lay out for the goals. And that's one kind of leader. And then there's another kind of leader. And, you know, we've kind of been talking about the MAGA group in that, you know, how does a Marjorie Taylor Greene become a leader? And in many cases, that's a place where you're looking in leadership value there, in my opinion, is looking for like the study hall teacher who lets you get by with everything in class and never looked up from their crossword puzzle and never caused you to grow. It was more leadership of letting you get by with whatever you wanted as a participant. This is as good as I'm ever going to get. And so how do we, because we have a huge anti-authoritarian streak in all of us, some more than others. How do you move an economy that needs to move with AI coming in and all these other things? And I'm talking. How do I move my right, you know, middle to right buddies on this, because they need it as much as I do. We all need to get our shit together and get into a new economic pattern and but we're scared. We're going to resist. We're going to find 1,000 reasons why not to. How do you, as a libertarian, how do you get a society to advance? Because as a liberal, what we'll do, better or worse, is we'll pass a $1.9 trillion spending deal. Right?
Right.
You know, that's what's going to end up happening with my bunch.
Right.
For better or for worse. And a lot of it's worse. So what's a different way to adapt behavior?
Well, so really you said it, is that we need to. It doesn't need to come top down. If it's something that we legitimately need to do, it is going to happen. Maybe not as fast as with, you know, a hammer or a big Green New Deal bill, but it will happen. People will start to adapt as solar becomes more profitable, as windmills, because we've got these giant windmill farms now in Kansas. I never thought I would see that because of the opposition that there was to it 15, 20 years ago. Never thought I would see that.
Yep.
And so it's happening, and it can happen at a snail's pace, but as it becomes more profitable, more companies are going to come into that. There's a lot of oil companies now that are changing their mantra to being energy companies because they want to, you know, capitalize on this sort of stuff. Now, there are government incentives for going those green directions. Now, the pure libertarian answer is, you know, we'd be against that too, partly because really the government incentives have held back, have stymied the growth of wind and solar, because if you are getting automatic money from the government, your innovation, your approach is not going to be as competitive. So that's, again, the pure libertarian
stance. Pure libertarian. Yep.
So I do think that you said it in the beginning, if we need it, it will happen. From what I've seen of the Green New Deal, I, of course, haven't read all of it.
Sure.
But
I can respect that.
What I have seen of it, and of course what I've heard of it, I have to admit,
Yeah.
What I've heard of it, it's just too hot. It's too top heavy. It is, it is way too much of federal government. And just jokingly, but kind of serious. Any questions you have going from here on, if you start with should the federal government, my answer will be no. So just throwing that out there.
And see, I've brought up before on something like the Green New Deal.
I don't agree with it all, but I respect it. It's fair opinion. Yeah.
I think on things like the Green New Deal, what Obama tried to lay out were some goals, the Paris Climate Accord, some goals, because I think what happens is day to day businesses make decisions. And if you start making decisions with the constraint of trying to be green, you can start heading in the right direction without the stick. You can just follow the carrot of we're trying to do this. It would just be great if we, I think the mantra we're hearing from our current president is we need to take our innovative spirit and our brains and our collective energy and drive towards green solutions. Whereas I think as recently as, maybe a few years ago, you said green and people started laughing. Mm-hmm. And the good news is I think that's changed a lot. I mean, I think even people in the oil industry, literally making their money off oil, they'll say you're wrong about climate change. They'll do whatever. But even they're having to start understanding that,
right.
Green is good as a concept, and like you say, I'm glad to hear you say that there's people in the oil industry switching to the term energy, because obviously, we were all told in grade school we're running out of oil, right? So like you just, even if we don't phase out oil, eventually we just hit the end and you're all out of a job. So it only makes sense that while we're running on this oil model, you would start getting into the other energy realms, so that one day either the customers stop buying it or you can't pump it out of the ground efficiently. You're on a new horse carrying on into the future. And again, small changes, all the time I kind of scratch my head. I think I'm still a little ahead of it, but should I probably have a couple solar panels just of some type, like 3x4s? I got a good fence I could mount them on.
First of all, dude, you should have one of these solar camping things so you can always charge your gear, because it's so good.
Yeah.
And they're so fast, and it's all, the technology's getting so good. All right, Dave, let me throw a couple at you.
Real quick, Marty,
Yeah,
just
totally.
Jumping in on that, because to further my point, you are actually seeing companies that are now advertising that they are using some sort of green power or using recycling for this or that. As more and more people come to accept the scientific reality that we are affecting our environment, then more and more people are going to demand that the companies that they buy from are doing so socially conscious. And so those advertisements that, we're doing this, that's just evidence that more and more people want that. And
but here's my piece to that, because I think you're right. I saw the Super Bowl ads. I want that freaking that electric Hummer, dude.
Right?
Are you kidding me? But so similarly to the technological revolution of the railroad, Abe Lincoln had the federal government put the money up for the Transcontinental Railroad so that it could get done. Similarly, at this time and place, it feels like to me there needs to be some massive footing to say, all right, we need to level up our whole system to get whatever they're saying, 50,000 charging stations. If all, because Ford is moving to the green, moving to an all electric fleet by 35. GM said, I'm not sure what year they said, but those corporate commitments have to be met with an investment, I believe, that from an infrastructure piece that says, you know what, we're all in on this thing. We do have to make a flip now. We do need an interstate system now. Okay, so there's going to be some federal. So I think on those kind of pieces, there has to be some hand in hand, because I just think there has to be leadership outside of the corporate. Is that, I know we all live in this system, so we all live with it, but is that palatable? That kind of.
You don't think that there will be a market for that to begin with? You don't think that gas stations will recognize that the higher percentage of cars out there that are electric are going to say, well, we need to put some electric stalls in? You don't think that the market will do that as the cars themselves become more and more electric?
No.
Okay, fair enough.
Not necessarily.
I respect
I've owned a business. I run a church. Systems love to not spend money on infrastructural growth. They love to be can we get 100 more copies out of that copy machine that catches fire? Yeah,
Right,
we could
right,
try.
right.
That's I'm with you because if you're a smart gas station owner and you're like, oh my God, this is where it's going to go. You're right. But at some point there has to be a heavy in the room to say, no, this is a real shot caller move. And it's now happening. And to me, that's where government in the post New Deal world has to somehow rise up and lead. That's just my approach.
Yeah, the challenge of the consumer driving is consumers are motivated by multiple things. I do think it's great that people bought Priuses and people have bought electric cars because they just want to and they're being conscientious. Sometimes at huge expense to themselves. Sometimes a state like Colorado, buys the car back from you basically with incentives and really motivates you to make a decision like that. I think, we have to think about things like 2006, Al Gore had the inconvenient truth. I had to Google it, by the way, but Al Gore had the inconvenient truth, and I think he overshot a few points. But, you have to have, unfortunately, there's always going to be a bleeding edge in a movement, and there's always going to be governmental goals, individual people trying to be activists, and those kind of people out front making the noise drive people to buy Priuses and electric cars, drive the market things. I agree. But sometimes it seems to me, if we're trying, I think what it really comes down to is how urgent is the climate change problem. And of course, the environmentalists will say we're already over the curve. We're already SOL. I think most of us feel like, well, it's not that hot yet. And of course the answer is we'll do that until, it's like idiocracy and our fields have gone barren. So, there's a balancing act. And again, things like the government setting goals, Ford and Chevy have both said they're going to go electric by 2030 or something. And there are consumer-driven decisions, which is great. I mean, that's of course the fastest way to get it is if all of a sudden everyone just says, I'm going to buy all green. I'm not going to buy any more gas objects. That's great. That would definitely get us shifted there. But, for multiple reasons, sometimes gas is better. Sometimes you need a chainsaw that you work all day and you can't stop and charge it. And you need a gas chainsaw or whatever. So, the question
is up in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, or maybe you have to get 2 electric chainsaws so that one can charge while the other one, whatever. I think it has to be a blend of multiple solutions. I don't think capitalism is the solution for everything. And something like moving people towards green, I think you have to, some of the things we're talking about, incentivize it and try and incrementally encourage people. And of course, it's just like, there's people that run classic cars that run on regular gas and they have to buy unleaded and add an additive to it, if I'm not mistaken, to make regular gas. So that's kind of uncomfortable. It's kind of unfortunate. So yes, as the consumers, as we turn more and more to electric, it's going to be harder and harder to find a gas station. Gas cars are going to start becoming harder and harder to keep up. But all this said, 3 years ago, I bought a huge SUV. So, even though I know where we're headed, I'm still headed the wrong way. So, how do we all start pushing the right way? I don't really know. We're also fortunate in Wichita, by the way, a little pitch for Wichita. We're powered by Wolf Creek Nuclear Plant, which is probably the greenest form of energy. And then there are huge wind farms that have come up actually just north of Wichita. There's a big wind farm. And then if you travel I-70, there's several wind farms that have come up. And that's, of course, great, too. I mean, my understanding is the initial investment's hard to get the money back. But, with different programs, we're generating wind-based energy. So that's good. So I just think things like the Green New Deal or whatever, the Paris Climate Accord, I guess I would just say, I feel like not punitively, but if the federal government wants to set goals and encourage companies to try and meet those goals, I think wasn't it Obama that wanted passenger jets to be twice as fuel efficient by like 2030 or something? Maybe that can't happen. Maybe that's not possible. But, I was looking up in the sky the other day, a jet went over. My gosh, I mean, that condensation trail coming out of the back of those engines. I mean, there's a lot of thrust going on. Those are 2 really big engines burning a lot of fuel to do that. What if they flew 20% slower and, they were twice as fuel efficient? I mean, maybe that would work. I don't know.
Dave, I'm sorry. I'm going to do this real quick.
There you go. Right over your face. Now you know what we're talking about.
Carbon capture is the way to go, and Rebel Heart B for the win. Do you guys know what that is?
I'm not familiar with that.
It's essentially farming different. It's essentially letting the loam in the soil rebuild that can just soak in so much carbon. I grew up in Iowa and it's all wet land, and we all have tile in our fields. And what used to be there, that the loam soil on the top. A lot of it's gone, a lot of it's washed away or blown away. But to rebuild that and to rebuild some of the wetlands, it's a huge, and that could be. There have been agriculture programs that buy back land, essentially pay you not to farm it. I mean, that's as a kid that grew up on a corn and soybean farm, I was always wondering why we had 1,000 acres. Why are we only farming corn and soybeans? And it's like, well, that's what we sell. And so much of the market drove the decisions that were made. And of course, now, if with all the equipment we used to have and all the land we used to have, if we had approached farming the way we're talking about land and sustainability and different ways to farm the same land and keep the soil in check, man, we could have done a lot with that, So I don't know, market forces do, but I grew up around a lot of Monsanto and a lot of chemical salesmen and a lot of their free hats and their free bumper stickers and all that shit. And it was the next year, here's the next number, and you're going to buy this. And there was never a question about, wait, who's eating this corn?
Right. Didn't they used to do a lot of crop rotation where you'd grow clover for a year or something?
Yeah, we'd move it around, and then the clover. Yep.
You get paid to grow clover instead of crops.
Yep. We did a lot of mowing clover. Yes.
Yeah. That big field clover too. That's not like yard clover.
No, yeah, it's big. It smells really good.
Does it?
A lot of bees.
I
don't know. I'm thinking about that in terms of industry, because everything that we're dealing with in a lot of cases is adaptive change. And there's the idea of technical change and we've all been in those meetings before, where somebody comes in with a new idea and we all get excited and we all gave kudos to the guy with the new idea and we all go home and say, man, this is going to change the world, and nothing happens because none of us change. Mm-hmm. And we're in this time now with the pandemic and all the different things that have been happening, and Trump and Clinton, I'm going to say both as the same entity, because they're both to me, they're a plate tectonic, usurpation of a decade of our politics. It's just a big burp or hiccup or mess. And, I don't think it's going to stay with these cartoon character politicians forever. I really don't.
I hope not. I
think I don't know what you think about Biden, but I think Biden is at least a technocrat. He's at least a politician. He's not Mickey Mouse like the Clintons machine and the Trump machine did.
Right.
I'm nervous that there's a Republican machine left that's not playing Mickey Mouse, because I think the Democrats have a tendency to go down that route. We're going to watch that happen all again in 3 years when everybody's running for president, probably. It's a freaking clown show, man.
It's pretty messed up.
It's definitely gone that trend, and but it's been going that trend for 100 years or more. Have either of you ever seen the analytics?
I like that. Say more.
The analytics on the debate languages used, or the language in debates used on presidential debates. Have you ever heard any of this at all? Like the grade level of debates. For it. So Lincoln, and now I can't remember Lincoln Douglas debates.
Yeah.
12th grade level English. All right. When we got to Nixon, it was 9th grade, I believe. And then when we got into Bush Jr., it was down to 4th, 5th grade. And that's just kind of the level we're going. There's an old saying, I can't remember who said it, and I can't quote it either, so I'm just going to pretend I said it. But as we move forward, we continue to degrade the elites, and we continue to scoff at intelligence, to the point that one day we will all rejoice that we have elected to the presidency a complete idiot just like us. Mm-hmm. And I think we actually reached that level in the last one.
There is a historical analysis of the English language that I've heard several times that say that the English, similar to what you're saying, that the English language peaked in 1850. And that around that time, the reason for language, especially in those days, was specificity. And so the language, and if you go back and watch, like old shows that have tried to maintain those language patterns, they talk different than we did because they were exactly accurate for what they were trying to say. And then after the Civil War, we begin to see language bend as anti-authoritarianism stuff just begins to creep around. And so then, eventually good becomes bad, and, the mundane becomes awesome. I mean, I remember when that happened in the 80s, we were like, oh, it's awesome, dude. It wasn't awesome. It was something that happened today, but like that's how language. So back to what you're saying, man, that fits with how we are together.
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe not. Sorry,
language
go ahead,
definitely shifted. I noticed a few years ago, it used to be you watched the news. The newscasters were some of the best speakers you saw on TV. They're real time talking. They're putting down quality sentences. And then it's like a few years ago, suddenly you get this, the tornado is going to affect a 4 square mile radius, whatever that's supposed to mean. If someone could draw a circle with a 4 square mile radius, I'll give you $50. Just our language just sort of totally shifted. And I think Trump's a perfect example of how far that conversation slid. And keeping in mind, he was very popular. I mean, this isn't a straight up bash of Trump. They say he spoke at something like a second grade level or something. He used very few more than 2 syllable words. He broke almost everything down the way I do. I'm a horrible speller, so when I write a story, like let's say he imagined a situation where he would be incarcerated. Crap, I forgot how to spell incarcerated. Put in jail, and that's the way Trump talks. He breaks everything down into these smaller words. In fact, to the point that, there's several speeches where he'll just say, the one thing and the other thing, and we all know, and they lied, and they got to lock her up. And like, he didn't have one sentence that said, I think Hillary Clinton should be locked up for X. He his whole time he was president, I don't think we got very many just A, B, C equals D, laid out logical thoughts that you could absorb. And I think hopefully, I think that Biden's bringing it back up, at least hopefully to a 4th or 5th grade level where, you actually hear him speak and he's saying, I'm going to roll out vaccinations. They're going to be given to every state at a level that they can get to their goal of 100 million. You're like, oh, that sentence made sense. It was a plan. Yeah. Oh, it's so great. But yeah, I mean,
Ace is making the point. Ace is going to come in and say it's all punchlines with Biden.
Yeah. Or is it all punchlines with Trump? Who's he?
That's probably both, to be quite honest.
Possibly.
Just different punchlines.
Yeah.
Different level.
Well, and again, we don't need to digress. I think all of us are anti-Trump on this panel. David told me he's not a Trump supporter earlier. But obviously, people he was successful. I mean, he won in the 2016 election. So we can sit here and bash it, but you still have to include it as part of the trend because it did get him into office. So yeah, it's an interesting world we live in, and our speech patterns have dropped off, I think, dramatically. And I think, unfortunately, with the cable news where everyone can tune into the news they want, they have even less need to really slice and dice and be surgical with how they speak, because they're generally speaking to well off the center line of thought. And so they can just sort of sit there. And that's why you get these great quotes from probably either side where they say something that's just absolutely absurd. It's because they're not trying to split hairs. They're just going full fanfare mode. And yeah, so, and that doesn't encourage quality speech. I've never actually, I was the other day, I seriously for a second was about to look up Frederick Douglass debates on YouTube, which I realized was a really dumb thing to start thinking about typing. I believe those are all. I'm
sure they've been narrated. I'm sure somebody.
Maybe someone has acted them out. I'm not a huge sit down, especially that type of writing. Oh, reading a Frederick Douglass debate would, a Lincoln Douglas debate would be. But that's the whole basis of the Lincoln Douglas debate format that people do in high school, right? I mean, that's the quality of debates those guys had, and so it would be. I mean, it would be interesting to go back and look. I did watch a Kennedy press conference, or State of the Union. You guys, that one's very interesting to watch because there's probably only applause in it twice. It's not like now where they're like, and our country, and everyone stands up and they sit down and a minute later, and the Air Force, and everyone's on their feet. It was much more somber. Everyone's just sitting there. Could have been a Republican Congress too. I'd have to look that up too. But we've definitely gotten into more of a soundbite culture and hot button. And I mean, I think that's why people are so upset that Biden hasn't done a full press conference yet, is they've become so addicted to the cult of personality that was Trump. They just can't even understand a president who's just having press interactions he wants to have. He has his press secretary do press conferences every day. And he hasn't come out to do one of these, and make fun of the Republicans and dance on someone's grave. It's not what he wants to do right now.
Right.
He's being very, very liturgical and orderly and correct, and there's a place for that. But just mark my words that within a year of that, there will be a larger whiplash of people who are ready for what they want to call a real discussion again. Because, all right, let me turn it into this, because we're going to go down this road, and we don't have to diagnose the whole thing. But Dave, what do you think happened on January 6th? And I know I'm pushing it, but I want to go into that direction because I think it's about energy. I think it's about lack of people feeling like they have a voice in a lot of different facets. And so I'm not asking you to diagnose everything that happened on January 6th. I'm asking you in terms of this conversation about language and a bullshit index that's too high or too low. If you had any thoughts about that from what you thought might have happened.
A ton of thoughts on that.
Yeah, cool.
Something that I think is actually the most dangerous, or at least one of the most dangerous things on the planet right now, is confirmation bias. And so being in the circles that I am, I have Republican friends, libertarian friends. I've been invited to QAnon pages, some really serious conspiracy theory stuff. And I am amazed by what people believe and what people will repeat. And I will circle back to January 6th, I promise.
Okay. No worries, dude. Yep,
but
you're on it.
Take your time.
That's where it's coming from. There's a great show on Netflix, Social. I have to look it up. I'm sorry, but it's about social networks and how they give you information, how they feed you information, and it's based on right. I got to remember the name of that show, because if you haven't seen it, you've got to.
Jeff's on it. He's looking it up right now.
Is it Social Dilemma?
That's it. That's the one.
And it's amazing. Yeah. Watch it, everybody.
Yeah. So
Thank
great
you,
job, Jeff. Thanks. So what they feed you is what you already believe.
Yeah.
Like you don't get anything on your feed that you haven't already liked, that you haven't already acknowledged. I was looking at mine, because you can actually go in and Facebook decides where you are politically, and they've got a little meter for that. And I went and looked at mine, and it said moderately conservative or conservative. It goes up to highly conservative or highly liberal, and I didn't care for that. So I went in on Facebook and I searched socialism and Marxism and everything that I could, and liked all of them, so that I could bring my meter back to moderate. And
did it work?
It did. It did.
Okay, good.
And so when I get on my feed now, I get information from every direction, and it's great. It helps keep me balanced. A very good friend of mine, really intelligent. He's actually a surgeon. I told him a few days before the election, I said, I think Trump's going to lose. And there's no way. He's dumbfounded. And I said, you mean to tell me you don't think somebody that has never been over 50% approval ratings could possibly lose? And he said, no, there's no way. And he called me the night of the election when Trump was up, and kind of gloating a little bit. I said, just wait until the mail-in ballots come in. And sure enough, it went down. And he said, I've been to the rallies. The energy is there. We love him. Everything I see on the internet tells me that he's doing a great job. And it's because of this social dilemma. It's because he's being fed everything that he already believes, and he therefore believes everybody else thinks that too. And so getting back to what you're talking about with January 6th, those are a bunch of people that legitimately believe that the election had been stolen, not just because of Trump, but because of everything around us right now. The way the internet works, the way our information gathering works, they genuinely believe that. And I think some of them were just troublemakers. Some of them were trying to take their government back. I'm not condoning it. Please don't take my tone that way, because it was. I don't think, even if I were in that position, that I would be prone to breaking into the State House and vandalizing and that kind of stuff. But when you ask what happened there, this is what I believe. is that they genuinely believed that they were doing a good thing. They genuinely believed that they were going to take back their government. I don't know what they would have done had they gotten their hands on any of the congressmen there, but I shudder to think of it. But confirmation bias, I mean, I could do the rest of your show on that, but
I know. It's worthy.
It's very
so
straight.
I want to throw this out there.
Sure.
I can't remember his name right now, but he was the president, the dean of the Princeton Theological Seminary and their ethics department. He was of both. He was the theological dean and he was the dean of ethics for like 30 years. And as he was retiring, his wife said to him, "Hey, are you going to write something about what you've learned, as you're wrapping up your career?" And he wrote this treatise, small, probably 70-page book. And the title of it was On Bullshit. And in that book, he basically takes the discussion of truth. And the truth is a thing that is, and you deal with it as it is. And then he dealt with the concept of a lie, and how a lie is also a thing that you either are trying to protect or whatever, but it's a thing. It's a set point that you've done. But that there's this third entity of language and thought and culture. And it is this thing that has pervaded as he said, his 30 years of being a student. He watched the rising of this concept of bullshit, and that bullshit is this thing that never, its main job is to keep you from finding the truth or the lie. Because when you find the lie, you can deal with it. When you find the truth, you can deal with it. But in between, man, if I can keep you in the muddy waters. And so much of the media, first of all, the left media is all corporate media. So we don't have a real unbiased media either. I mean, you watch NBC News, dude, you're watching GE News. Let's give me a break over here, right? It's pro-war, it's pro big bill, it's pro DCCC, it's pro corporate, Democrats, Fox and all these other messes. They're a different, they're pro billionaire of a different sort.
Right.
And so we all know I think on all sides, our bullshit meter is high, dude. All of our antennae are going. And then what am I going to do? I'm going to go back to my bias. I'm going to go back to my bias harder.
And I don't know that we do all know that it's bullshit, honestly.
Okay,
and that's why January 6th happened, is because
those people are calling bullshit on me or us or something else. They've got somebody else they're calling bullshit on.
Gotcha.
As a motivating polemic to sort of know how they're getting through the day. They're like, I know Marty's full of shit or whatever. I mean, that's okay. That's what we're doing right now.
Right. No, I get what you're saying. So you're saying that they did call bullshit, but they called bullshit on the opposite direction.
Mm-hmm.
They called bullshit on the election and the news of the election itself.
Because none of us can agree that there's a truth.
Right. Well, it's hard to find the truth. This is a true story. So probably a couple of years ago, I was thinking of a song, and it was done by this certain artist. And my friend said, no, it was not done by him. And I was like, I'll prove it. So I got on Google and I typed in the song by said artist, and it pulled up. It pulled up that's who did it. There's the first page. And I was like, look, I proved it. Well, we scrolled down a little bit, and that was just somebody else that was wrong like me. But because I had searched for it, I found somebody else that was also an idiot. And, I reinforced my own wrong conclusion.
Wow. What a great example.
It's there. And so if you believe in a flat earth, you can find a million other people that believe in the same thing. And then when you get into these echo chambers, then it just snowballs. And, you believe that everybody should believe this. Anybody that's not in this room is an idiot. And I really believe it's one of the most dangerous things out there. And it's happened because of the internet, the information age. Obviously, we can't avoid that. But there's got to be some way that we can counter that. Like I have my TV on I put it on MSNBC. When that goes to commercial, I switch over to Fox.
Mm-hmm.
And, I watch both, and it's amazing the difference. But it does keep me a little bit more balanced. And I already told you what I did with my Facebook feed, and that has really helped me. But there's not a lot of Reagan conservatives out there that are going to go search for socialism and Marxism and like everything so that they can get that balance. Some people don't want to hear it. But it's a very dangerous situation, and it also gets into the legislative side. So Marjorie Taylor, you mentioned her earlier, Marjorie
Taylor
Greene.
Yeah.
She's a prime example of it. She is legislating from a point of confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. And if she's not the first, she's one of the first, but she won't be the last. And so that's what scares me about it, is pretty soon we're going to be run by people that are making decisions for us based on wrong information. And I don't know how to stop that.
So now I'm going to pick on the question. I've just thought of this, and I need to know. Tell me about life under Trump as a libertarian with friends who are further, I don't know what you call that, conservative, right? Whatever,
sure,
Trump.
Yeah.
Can you tell me places in the last 4 years where you guys differed? Because for us, I'm telling you this, there's a whole bunch of people over here on the comments. For us, it was monolith. There was no questions asked the whole 4 years. So if you could help me open that up, that's going to, I think, help a lot of us.
So I really haven't talked much about what I've done in the past, but I have been a libertarian actively in politics for 20 years now. I've run for office a couple of times. I've worked on campaigns. Okay. So I have learned the art of finding solutions that make everybody happy and avoiding conversations with friends that don't need to happen.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I understand that.
So definitely with some of my more ardent Trump fans that are friends, I wasn't shy about saying I'm not a supporter of Trump, but I would let them go on their little rants and just let it go. But I also wouldn't go into what I really, really thought about Trump. Mm-hmm. I do believe that he has hurt the American brand more than any individual that I can think of in history. In a vacuum, there's some of the policies, some of the executive orders that I would agree with in a vacuum. But his complete and utter lack of tact, unstatesmanlike behavior, it really put a black eye on America. And so the short answer,
I guess where I'm at is those places where you maybe didn't go. Because I want to reach, I have people in my life I need to reach across the aisle to. And there are some things that they're holding on to that are just glass houses that they don't even believe. Right. And then there are others that they really do believe. And the few of those, you didn't kick those glass houses in, I'll bet, so that you could maintain the relationship where you're like, dude, I could run through this in 5 seconds and it'd be over.
Right. So if I'm in a position where I need to, if it's a political conversation with somebody that is discussing policy, then I'm going to come in like a wrecking ball. Mm-hmm. But when it's a friend, when it's somebody that I've got a relationship with, live and let live. I'm never going to lie. I'm never going to say rah Trump. I've never done that. But I'll avoid a conversation that doesn't need to happen.
The hardest thing I think with confirmation bias and the conversations, I know exactly the type of conversations you're talking about, Dave. We're in a similar situation sometimes where we have close friends that have very vast political views. What I find most challenging under the era of Trump, and maybe it's always been true, I don't know. But for example, on the guy who taught me bass, on his Facebook wall, somebody came in. He posted this whole thing about we've been apart from each other for too long, we've separated from each other for too long. It was this big, basically anti-COVID protocols rant. And I just said, hey, this virus isn't done with us. We're done with it, but it's not done with us. We need to continue to be careful. It's good. It's good that we have these ways to interact, whatever. The next person that came in starts ranting, and I'll just give you the first part of their rant. They said Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci were college roommates, and Fauci's making Bill Gates a ton of money because they're evil. Well, I did a quick Google search, and Fauci graduated med school when Gates was 11. I mentioned some of this in a past show, but I just started asking back, like, okay, listen, crazy rant person, help me understand how Fauci and Gates were roommates, the beginning of your rant, because I don't see how they were ever possibly roommates. This person, they lose their stuff. They start calling me a fearmonger. They say it's a red flag when you start focusing on the wrong part of the story, blah, 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 blah. If they don't do that, then they just switch topics and say, well, you probably support pedophiles or something completely unrelated. We live in a time where, and maybe it's that dumbing down of discussions. I don't have a problem. If someone wants to say, hey, taxes are bad, well, let's discuss that. But like you ask two questions, and they go on to the next thing. They say, oh, you must like Bill Clinton and his Oval Office blowjobs. You're like, what does that have to do with taxes? Like we were talking about taxes a second ago. So that confirmation bias, I think the other thing it creates is this shell around, don't challenge I just told you what I believe. When I ask you back, well, 6 isn't 5. How can 6 be 5? Oh, it's classic liberal trying to erode the foundation of my perfectly sound thought process. It's like, it's hard because they cling to it so much that you can't even have a conversation. If they feel like that confirmation bias is, if their understanding of the world, you challenge it in any way, it's like they shut down, like you're trying to take God from them. They clamp down like it's a religion. So it makes it really hard because I end up in these situations where a good friend of mine is just ranting at me about how terrible the Democrats are. And all I can really do is give back one-liners of like, well, but Trump just passed this that's against what you just said. And, Democrats have never said the thing you're saying over here. Democrats as a whole have never said they're going to take all guns. Dave and I had a sidebar about that. There might be some Democrats that want your guns, but as a party, we don't. So it's like you try and plug the levee with the holes they've punched, and by the time you're plugging the third one, they shoot 6 more. It's like, well, I mean, I don't know if you really want to have a conversation or you just want to call me names all day.
Well, I mentioned this a couple of shows ago. I've been reading about the Greek debate sort of triad, and you make an argument on the pathos, which is the being or the heart. You make an argument on the ethos, which are the ethics and where we stand on the issue, and then you make an argument and you win the hearts based on the logos or the logic. The problem is that with a lot of easy jingoism and flag waving, we can say we've got the heart, and so people hear a few confirmation bias quotes or facts from that place where they're like, no, Democrats are bad. That's heart stuff. That's not logic stuff, Jeff. Right? And then if you've got the being, they know where they are because they know themselves. They know what they're in. That's not being questioned on any of our sides. Those pieces, we're not doing that work. That's hard work, and we're not doing that. So what we do is we have 2 pieces of our triad that are foundation. They're already set. You're not going to change your being, and you're not going to change what you believe about what's right. And so then we're going to play tiddlywinks in that third section of logic. And I can't move you, or you can't move me, because 2/3 of me are not even up for question. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so much of where we are caught is that isolated debate. And the debate is just literally, it's just kids in the back seat playing slap fighting. You know what I mean? It's not real.
Right.
Because when, and this, I was going to pull back to this. I've asked Jeff this 100 times. Dave, I'll ask you. After all this crazy bullshit, right? After all this stuff has gone on, and then we go back to society, and maybe in a year we've moved past masks and we're all sitting together at a Little League softball game. How are we going to be a people again after this? If we know who the other guy is and they know who I am, are we going to be able to agree on balls and strikes as a people? Like, is there anything that we can unify around? And this gets into the pathos and the ethos stuff, right? And I know that there is. Obviously, I know there is. I'm a pastor. I bring people together in crazy situations all the time. But you just don't get forgiveness without real repentance. I mean, otherwise it's just window dressing and bullshit. We're just kicking the can down the road for the day when you finally do have to make the change or face the truth, and then healing can begin. But humans are, and we'll put it off. Like,
are you asking me?
I don't know. I'm just being rhetorical about
Gotcha.
like how do we rebuild in a system of distrust when we can't use logic, Jeff? You're never going to even in fact, you're going to isolate yourself from that woman in that relationship if you keep going down that road. I know I do. I disagree with her about this and this and this, and then pretty soon she's like. So how do we do it? How do we have a softball game again?
And by the way, asking her to explain her point, not telling her she's wrong. Can you tell me why? I get it, though. I know what you mean. Yeah, she stopped talking. Yeah, she definitely stopped talking. Second round of explain it, she stopped talking. So you're absolutely right. How do we have that ball game? Yeah. How do we not? How is my son at the plate not going to be a lousy Democrat batter? And it doesn't matter what gets thrown; it should be a strike because we're just that bad. We're just bad people. Yeah.
Have we not been there for a while now, though? I mean, of course, with Trump and with Obama too. I mean, and I'm not blaming either one of them at this point. I'm just talking about those eras and where we were as a people and where we still are with this extreme divide. And a lot of it has happened because, again, the confirmation bias. I don't want to continue to beat that dead horse, but the confirmation bias, the information we get from news and the news source that we have, we think that everybody else is just wrong and we can prove it. I feel like I don't feel like it was the pandemic that created that, maybe exacerbated it, but I think it's a road we've been going down for a while, and I don't know the answer to the question as to how we go back to being a single people, except if I could go to just fantasy land and dream about not having parties, and electing people just based on their ideas and not pigeonholing people into something that they have to be if they wear an R or a D. And that could help lessen the divide. I don't see it as a likelihood, but I know that would be one solution. And just voting for some moderation. I guess that's a realistic proposal. But again, the way these people get pushed, and working on campaigns the way I have, I have seen candidates that come in doe-eyed but principled, with really strong held, solid beliefs, and they get pushed. They get pushed into certain areas, and they can't get out of it if they want to get into office. And then once they're there, of course, they're still being pressured, and so the divide is coming from so many different avenues that I don't know. I don't know the real solution.
Question: do you think that the two-party system has a greater grip on the national politic or the state politics? In other words, if we were going to try to move and really have a multi-party system, would we need to be attacking it on the state party side or the federal party side first to be the most efficacious?
Interesting. I haven't had that thought before. I'd probably say on the federal side, because even though the politics that matter to you most are the local ones, the ones that affect you the most, the ones that people pay attention to the most are the federal ones. And so I think it would.
But I'm just thinking about breaking the back of that system. If you were like, all right, we're really going to do it, and you get the Greens and the Libertarian, whoever, you get 5 of them and they're all like, we're going to do it.
Right.
Would you have to unify at the state level too, like pretty quick, if you were going to also do something federally?
I think you're right there. I think you would have to. I will, I'll ignore the Libertarians for a moment. If the Green Party were to get 5% in the presidential election, that would change things fundamentally. 5% gives somebody the moniker of a major party. And so then under the old system, they would be automatically in the debates. It's changed now, but they would actually start getting matching federal funds for their campaigns, which Doesn't matter to the Republicans and Democrats right now, but it would matter to those smaller parties. And then they start getting better candidates because they've got the money, and that would snowball. You would see an effect like that. The only third party that ever did that was the Reform Party with Perot.
Yep.
They got something like 15%, and then they got those federal funds. And then they did get some good candidates for the next election, but some mismanagement and in-party fighting killed that party before it could get going. And I think it was a brand new party, and I think that was part of it. I think a more established party like Libertarians or the Green could make a difference and could stay together enough to drive a wedge in between the two major parties. This last election, the last election, we got, Libertarians got 3.5%, and that was up from 1.8% the previous election. So we really thought we were on the trend, and I had high hopes we could get that 5%, but it tanked. It didn't go. The people were so concerned about Trump and getting him elected or not elected that everything else went the wayside. But without plugging too heavily a Libertarian Party, any third party, get them that 5%. And it could be a deal breaker.
Just to crack the egg, and then all of a sudden you're doing it differently.
Right.
I mean, I think that's what we were wondering too, was going to happen with the Republican Party post-Trump, if that could potentially happen. I think we've found our answer, it seems.
Yeah, there's been some talk of a split. I think Trump has come out and said that he would not support that, because there was some talk about a whole separate party that would follow Trump, and then the Republicans would be the Republicans. And I don't know. I mean, maybe that could be a good thing, but it's not going to happen.
They're not going to let that split. Break your own back.
It'd be a good thing.
Right.
It'd be a good thing for the Democrats for a few years while both parties struggle for the voter. The one thing I'd say about unifying, I think, one of the seven habits of highly effective people, because I've learned this from my child's grade school that has a Leader in Me program that uses the 7 habits relentlessly, is seek first to understand, then to be understood. Also the Socratic method. Also Confucius says, if two people always agree, one of them is not needed. I would suggest that the three of us on this panel, though we have different political views, are probably the type of person that stops and listens, even to a QAnon person. And we listen, and we listen, and we listen, and they think they're red pilling us. They think they're getting us in QAnon. And then we sit back and we go, no, that makes absolutely no sense. We listened, we attempted to understand, and we were like, that's way too far, man. You have just built a shit sandwich on shit bread. That goes nowhere. That's a non-starter for me. It doesn't make any sense at all. And we just walked away. But so many people have just tripped into it. Maybe didn't have any opinions before they heard a Q opinion and said, well, that's exciting.
Well, I had that experience where I listened, and they thought I was agreeing because I was being quiet, and normally I'm loud and whatever. Right. But they were like, listen, and then I did that. I was like, man, there's nothing here that I will buy, and they were so offended that I listened that long.
Yeah. But we're trying to understand. I mean, I can tell with the three of us, even though we don't don't agree on politics, someone comes to us and says, did you know X? And they start like rattling off facts, and we go, that's not right. Those weren't the years of World War II, or that doesn't make sense. How would anyone know that whatever this crazy theory is, But I mean, people hear flat Earth and go, yes. And I will tell you one thing to be very careful about. Anyone, QAnon, the MAGA, ultra MAGAs, which really are QAnons, the flat earthers, what they all say, I've heard all of them say this, the MAGAs, the flat earthers, they've lost family, they've lost friends. All their friends are Q, or all their friends are flat earthers. It's a really bad sign. If your employer is scared of you, your neighbors are scared of you, your family is scared of you, your friends are scared of you, if you're alienating everyone around you with your beliefs, you probably need to seek counseling help, seriously, and really try and understand what you're headed for. Now, maybe you're a prophet. Maybe you're the one prophet we've all been waiting for. But odds are more realistic that someone that's very compelling has sold you a big shit sandwich, and everyone around you goes, that's not the way to go, man. That's bad. And you somehow think when everyone around you tells you it's bad, somehow your ego tells you, I'm right. All of you are wrong. I'm going to go be by myself. And unfortunately, that's happened thousands of times with these QAnon folks, with the flat earthers. They just, what you were talking about, Marty, 2/3 of them says they're absolutely on the right path, and logic isn't going to get them out of it. Mm-hmm. And even when there's an insurrection in Q's name, they're still sitting here going, no, that was, I mean, my QAnon buddy that had dropped QAnon supposedly comes back with, no, it's Antifa. Here's the mugshot of this guy. It didn't match at all. Here's this one person who has happened to be at some Antifa events and has been at some Proud Boy events. So that's proof. Look, there was an Antifa there. Okay, well, even if there was one Antifa there, they just, again, their confirmation bias. They're seeking the straws that tie their whole thing together, and the rest of us are going, you're totally wrong. You're absolutely on the wrong track. So so things like having Dave on this panel. I watch conservatives all the time on Periscope. I do switch to Fox News. And man, I mean, I can see the net they're trying to weave, and I can tell it's built on nothing. The really extreme conservatives on Fox News. There's several people on Fox News that are decent journalists. But the editorial type journalists, it's like the other day, what's his name? Tucker Carlson went off on Sneetches and said that liberals are trying to ban Dr. Seuss, and the Sneetches isn't even one of the books they stopped publishing.
Right.
He was an example of a book that's still a mainline published Dr. Seuss book as to how liberals are trying to cancel, in this case, awareness of multiculturalism of all things, I believe is what he said Sneetches teaches. That was a fun Seuss rhyme.
He says Sneetches teaches?
But it wasn't, Sneetches isn't even one of the books that's being stopped by the publisher. So you just, you go to these other sources, and because you don't have the same confirmation bias or the same bigotry, they try and weave this web and say Democrats hate freedom or something. And we just go, wait a second. I mean, Democrats hate freedom. I mean, that doesn't, whenever your argument has to include the other half of the population is evil, tells me your argument's pretty weak to start with. I mean, I acknowledge conservatives. I have no problem with Republicans. Anyone who's still a Trumper, I've got some serious questions for. But, even some people still supporting Trump. But, boy,
Dave, I got it one more time. Here you go. But what is distinct? This is way back from Tangerel. What is distinctively corporate about their news delivery? I want to talk about this NBC. Really quickly. I want to talk about NBC because in corporate law, the way a corporation is structured, it has to exact the most profit that it possibly can. It's the nature of the corporation, and so while you do have very liberal bias and East Coast bias on MSNBC and CNN and other liberal news networks, if you will, they're still run by massive corporations and therefore have to flow along. And one of the ways you can see that, if you go back, and I would just recommend watching Chris Matthews in March of 2003 and watch him from the beginning of March being opposed to the war in Iraq, and then a few lies being told, i.e. Colin Powell coming out with the weapons of mass destruction quote. And all of a sudden, the lefty Chris Matthews was immediately sold on that sketchy, and everybody was looking at that going, I don't know if I believe that or not, but man, they went right for it. There's a whole bunch of examples of the left-wing media carrying the ball for the current broken politic that we have. And in the last two elections, I would just recommend going back and looking at the questions asked by all the major news networks. Most of them are left-leaning, and look at the quality of questions that were asked of the candidates in the primaries. You will notice a level of questions that are so juvenile and caught up in some current event looking for a gotcha answer. I'm a Lutheran pastor. I've been doing it for 20 years. When I go for an interview, before I gain the trust of an organization, I have to write a 20-page biography. I have to have a psychological analysis. I have to talk about my prior relationships. They get to interview anybody they want to from prior congregations so that they can really assess who they're about to give trust over to. And then once we go through that process, it's rock and roll. Similarly, it should be that way when we choose our candidates for public office. But our media is our vetting source. And our media's questions allow us to have a person like Donald Trump. You have to remember, Donald Trump is a creation of the media. Wouldn't have happened if they would have taken him as seriously as they needed to right away and asked him questions and made him sit on the hot seat. But instead, they bent over and took a whole bunch of phone calls from him because that's what he would allow them to take for month after month after. And pretty soon, he had them exactly where he wanted them. eaten out of his hand, and he was more important than he really was. And pretty soon it was too late, and he was their candidate, and then here we go. Like, we have to be honest looking backwards at the historical patterns of how these decisions are made. And the left-wing corporate media are complicit dance partners in the craziness.
Sure.
So that's my sermon. That's it. I just wanted to say that because it was back there and I didn't want to let it go.
Yeah. Back in the day, I watched Manufactured Consent by Noam Chomsky. There's the People's History of the United States by, is it Howard Zinn? Something like that. There's a lot of
the old conservative. What was his name? Yeah. William Buckley. Like, that guy would skewer a candidate.
Yeah. There's been a lot of
want them to be skewered. I want a candidate that can go through that, right?
Right. Yeah. It's actually the responsibility of the media was to, keep the politicians honest. That's why in the very early parts of the country, it's called free press, because we needed them to get in there and vet these guys. And also, once elected, keep them honest, keep them under wraps. And they have really failed at that in recent decades. And as you pointed out, I only see it getting worse.
Yeah.
The only good news is we do still have a lot of historically print news. I mean, they're not print anymore, but we do have things like, the New York Times. They've dropped how many stories in the past, 10 years, just eviscerating. I mean, it'll be Cuomo, it might be Trump. I mean, they seem to do a pretty decent job of, like, we've done investigations, we've got these sources, we have found this major problem. And I don't know how many times the New York Times has had to drastically apologize. I think it's been relatively few. Obviously, maybe these people all skip mass media class. News has bias. I mean, to your point, Marty, I mean, whether it's Fox News or CNN, if they actually got a news story that dropped on their lap that Donald Trump was an alien or something, they probably wouldn't report it because they'd be like, this will absolutely cause chaos in the streets. Like, we got to keep people buying gas and buying cars and having credit card debt. And, like, we have to, you know what I mean? Like, they would have a shell over it and be like, what are we going to do with this? They wouldn't just immediately go on the air because they do have a priority. They do have a brand to protect. They do have salaries. They do have income. So we have to always be aware of their bias. I mean, obviously they have a bias, and obviously with cable news, you have an audience and you have your ratings. And if you alienate your audience, your ratings are going to fail. Then you're not going to be able to sell ads. So, that's the sort of, we've talked about this before a lot, Dave, the idea that yes, mainstream news has bias, but Doug on YouTube has no checks and balances at all. I mean, you've got a liberal news media or a right-wing news media with their bias, but they still can't go on and just outright say, Joe Biden is an alien. Because Joe Biden isn't an alien, there's no proof he's an alien. That's unacceptable. You can't do that. But so-and-so on the internet can do whatever the heck they want. And so instead of a biased media, people dump that for basically blogs and vlogs. And I only realized lately how obscure Q himself actually was. Q would drop numbers and lists and just nothing. And then the Q community would turn it into a story with all their confirmation bias and whatever unusual information sources they had. And then that would turn into the story. That would turn into the story is what a group of bloggers basically felt about whatever Q's 20-word drop was for the week. So it was probably the worst way to gain information. I mean, it'd just be like shouting into echo chamber, monkeys, and then you run away. And then, a week later, they're writing the stories for you. Absolutely unbelievable that people are.
If you were commenting on that behavior, you wouldn't use the word information anywhere in it.
Right.
It's not behavior of gathering information. It's something else going on.
And that, again, circles back to that dead horse that I keep beating, the confirmation bias. That's what's happening is people aren't trusting the national medias, and they're watching Doug on YouTube and learning about, the flat earth and the Anunnaki and whatever else is out there. And they're believing it. And because so many other people around them are believing it too, it becomes truth to them. And so that is another failure of the media, is not keeping themselves accountable and allowing these people to seek other means of getting their news, because that's really where a lot of this has come from.
I want to go back to something you said as a response earlier, Dave, which is there and I'm not picking on anything, I'm just throwing this out there. Is there a market approach to this? Is there a way where we can, gosh, I mean, it'd be nice if there was a way where we could have, what am I trying to say? The supposed integrity of an open source system that we have on some like Wikipages and some of these other, Wikipedia that have been worked on and people have collaborated and, somebody's probably monkeyed with it too, but then you come in and you fix it up and it actually does a positive thing. It seems like there might be some room there for a validation system.
So, a lot of people are looking at Facebook and they're fact checkers now and saying, oh, this is a violation of free speech. But it's actually a private company and they can do what they want with what you post on their site.
Yeah.
But that's an example, I think, of what you're talking about. They are actually taking responsibility under pressure of both government and the market. The government's yelling at them a little bit, but also people are saying, I'm going to get off Facebook if this the type of things is going on. And so they are proactively taking action on a number of different things that get posted on Facebook. They put, I don't know if you guys are on Facebook. I know you're on Twitter, but they will block out a picture and say, this may be misleading. You can still look at the picture, but they'll have a little article underneath there as to why it is. And so
I actually, just so you know, I got off Facebook a couple of years ago after seeing the social networking thing.
Oh, no kidding.
I was just good like, move. You know what? Done. And that was it. So
good move. I have to stay on. I've got too many friends and family that want to watch my kids grow up and that kind of stuff. So I stay on, not for information gathering, but really just to keep in touch with family and friends. But they are taking that approach. I don't know what Twitter is doing on that, except for shutting down the president's account and
shutting down Periscope too. I don't think they were watching any of the crazy shit that's been happening on here for the last 5 years. And they just figured it out, and they were like, "Uh-oh, let's shut it down." I don't know. That's my image.
They probably doesn't know. End of the month, they're claiming Periscope's going to just stop.
Yep.
So we'll have to do Twitter Live. We're not exactly sure what's going to happen. That's our main. That's where most of these comments are coming from.
I see.
I think one thing that's very important too to talk about at this moment is you've got confirmation bias, right? And you've got conspiracy theories. We've talked about this briefly before, but I think what's really dangerous is what often the progressives will talk about is hate. In like a QAnon person will be like, hate. Well, they don't understand that when as a QAnon, you're being fed something about, let's just say, Joe Biden being a pedophile, which I firmly believe he is not. They don't understand that when you're feeding people Joe Biden is a pedophile, you're actually generating a lot of hate. You're generating hate towards Democrats, hate towards Joe Biden. I would argue, by the way, you're blurring a very terrible act of being an actual pedophile by throwing it around casually in a situation where you don't have any proof. And so step by step, story by story, these confirmation bias are driving somebody to a corner where they truly believe the liberal half of the country is truly evil. Like not just wrong, not just I don't like them. Historically politics has been more like pro football. I hate the Raiders because I'm a Chiefs fan. F the Raiders. But I mean, in a parking lot, I'm not going to get a fight with the Raiders fan. Like I understand we're both just loving our team. But now, there's people that'll just straight up tell you, and I'm sure you've heard this, probably mostly from the right, talking about the left, because you're not a part of it. But I get it sometimes straight to my face. You guys blankety blank. You guys want to destroy America. You're just like, what are you talking about? You guys hate the flag. I've had people say that straight to my face. You guys hate the flag. I'm like, I'm an Eagle Scout. I mean, I love the flag. I mean, what are you talking about? Mm-hmm. So people don't realize as they're going along with this conspiracy theory, they think it's all positive, but the further they get, the further they are from reality, and they're actually being really turned against their fellow Americans, and that's where things really start to get dicey. Slow, gradual confirmation bias drives them to a point where their bigotry is out of control to the point they might not stop in a snowstorm to help somebody with the Biden sticker because they're convinced that Biden sticker person's evil. That's never been, I don't think that's the way I understand there was a civil war. Lincoln was an extremely divisive president, for example. I know the country's been split, but even I think in Lincoln times, I mean, people would put down their rifles at night and share camp. You know what I mean? Like people still interacted with each other as humans, even though they were fighting on opposite sides of a battlefield. You know, we live in a time now where it's like, oh no, you vote against me. Some people, the extremes, you vote against me, you're terrible. You know, my wife doesn't want to associate with Republicans, the Trump voters, specifically Trump voters, because she just feels Trump so bad that anyone that could bring themselves to vote for him is just a bad person. And I have to be like, now wait, you know, because again, I don't want her to go down that road either. You know, we have to keep our minds, you know, you're going to interact with people that you don't agree with. You know, it's, you know, politics shouldn't be that bad. But then again, then just to become what they hate, we had these QAnon MAGA Trumpers break into the freaking Capitol and disturb Congress. So now they've given us an example to actually hate QAnon Trumpers because they've actually tried to destroy our government. So that's going to have an echo effect on the left. And so here we go, ping ponging. And I just can't help but think we have to try and understand each other. We have to not dehumanize each other. You know, dehumanization, just calling the other side flatly wrong or evil. I think those are just huge mistakes. You know, I think even the people that broke in the Capitol, I think they were very, very misled. I've said this on here before. I've gotten beat up for it. You know, that Ashley girl that got shot, she believed so much in a conspiracy that she went against a cop telling her not to come through that window and got shot to death. That's tragic on so many levels. I'm not saying she didn't deserve to get shot. I'm just saying she had political beliefs that drove her to walk into the line of fire and acknowledge the line of fire and still walk into it and get killed. That's a sign of a very large, significant problem. And part of it's hers, But as a society, you know, we have to start understanding that these people will share our earth with us. And even that person, as crazy as she obviously was to do that, to go that far, crazy metaphorically, not literally, I still feel for the fact that this person died. I mean, this person thought she was doing right. And that's just how whacked out we are as a country, that someone who thought they were doing right was trying to attack Congress people, and a cop had to defend them and killed her. And what a terrible situation for us to be in. And something, by the way, Q should own. That, you know, what's weird is nobody on the Q side talks about that. I've heard no one talk. I'm sure they'd say she was a plant, it was fake, she didn't really die. Who knows what they would say?
Well, they do. They're saying that it wasn't conservatives that stormed that stormed. I was about to say storm the castle. That stormed the state house, or the where I'm going, the Capitol building. They believe it was Antifa in disguise. I mean, right. I know you guys have heard this.
Yeah.
And so they're not taking the responsibility. They're not going to feel accountable if you point it out to them, because again, they're in this echo chamber and they're being told that they weren't responsible. So I don't know how you fix that. Unfortunately, it's on both sides too. I have been told directly by people on the left that Republicans are evil, just with those exact words. And that, you know, if you believe that somebody is evil, you're not going to attempt to find, to find a solution that you'll both like, because you think that anything that they want is a bad thing. And so, right. Yeah. So that divide that we have, it's almost insurmountable in that regard.
Let me throw something else on this here. In the last, certainly in the last year, but before that, it's been a trend where, you know, when we were kids, you would, if you wanted to know what, back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s, if you wanted to know what the weather was going to be, you'd turn on the local news and watch the weather. Or later on when the internet came up, you'd go to the app and you'd see what the weather is.
Right.
We've moved into a place now where every single person, let me pull back for a second. If there was a governmental program that spoke to us about something, we would listen to their facts and we would talk about the facts that they gave us. We've moved into a place in our minds now where we are informivores. We're constantly looking for the next piece of information for our own internal sake. We are satiated by finding new facts. It becomes habitual. We also, as we go down confirmation bias, and we're allowed to make our own decisions. So now all of us, every single person made their own decision about how they were going to respond to a pandemic. The government didn't decide. Every single person got to decide. Every single person gets to decide whether or not they believe in global warming, whether or not I did the research or whether I didn't. And so I think there's something to that too, where everybody's on their own island. And, you know, back to the pathos we're all scared a little bit. We're all running around with a pathology of like, I don't know what the hell's about to happen to me, but I'm not big enough to stop it. And I don't know if there's any offensive linemen out there to block for me anymore. And then I got to find a new team.
I
don't know. There's something to that too, where it's just the decision making is changing on all fronts, both macro but also micro. I can sit home and be like, nope, it's going to rain tomorrow. I've got the reference. I know.
I think that's true to an extent. I think, for example, what happened with COVID was we got a lot of mixed messages, very few consistent, direct plans from our president. So unfortunately, what happened was we all denucleated and figured out how we felt about the situation. And so we end up in situations talking about should restaurants be open, and it starts with someone saying masks don't work and COVID is the flu. Well, that's a big gulf. If I'm just trying to figure out at what number of people you should have in your restaurant, should they be wearing masks? If you tell me everything I've just said is a lie, we're in a real gulf. And so having leadership that says, yes, COVID's real. Yes, it's contagious. Yes, masks help. Use social distancing, wash your hands, which, by the way, I believe Trump said all those things at one time. But he also said the exact opposite multiple times. So, again, environmentalism, we need to start getting the same information from Republican and Democrat people. Look, we need to start being more green. We have a problem. We're gonna run out of fossil fuels, or we're gonna overheat our. That's how we stop being completely. If there was one weatherman for the country and he told you Colorado's going to snow, there were people that disagree with him, but it would be this like subset fringe type thing. Versus there are no weathermen. We all just have to like hang out, wind socks and thermometers and calculate our dew points, and we all have our own theories about the weather. So I think leadership can help hopefully limit the number of versions of the truth. And hopefully
a guy with better radar than you, man.
Right, my radar. I looked west right before sunset. I saw a huge storm coming in. So I've got information you don't have, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. Red sky at night, sailor delight. So I saw red sky, so we're going to be fine. You get the idea. I mean, that's kind of what's happened is, historically the press here, press there, presidents or this or that. The other thing is, by the way, even with the media, I've noticed and several times I've come on and even defended Donald Trump when he said something about PTSD. Some people come back from combat, they're fine. Some people aren't as strong and they come back with PTSD. And that was ripped apart in the media. I mean, he was torn apart for it. Well, I watched the speech, and while it was an ignorant thing to say, I just think it was in the flow of conversation. I don't think he meant it as weak people get PTSD. But you have to go back and find the speech. You have to watch the 5 minutes before. And I've done this multiple times. I find the White House transcript. I find the quote. I look in the document. Okay, it's 75% of the way through the document. So I'm going to go to 75% of the way through the video, maybe 65%. Watch 10 minutes. Here it is. And you watch the quote and you don't believe it's the way it is. We're seeing, if you're watching your news source, especially talk about the opposition, I mean, I've noticed sometimes now clips are getting down to like words, like 5 words. It's pretty hard to make sure you got the context right and just like, I don't like this bill. See, Mitch McConnell doesn't like the bill. Maybe the next sentence he said was, I love everything about it except for this, and I can't vote for it. Maybe he had some great statement. Maybe he sucks. But, we're just down to these little snaps and snips. And, yeah, we're all getting our information from different places. I mean, yeah. Now, I will be fair. I did watch many of Trump's speeches just to make sure I wasn't doing that, and it still made me sick to my stomach. So, just to be fair, I watched many of his full speeches, and it was as horrible as CNN made it seem, quite frankly. I don't know that they were unfair to him really ever. Even the PTSD comment was bad, but I think it was just in the flow of conversation. I don't think he meant it the way it was being taken. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing we have to encourage people to do what we're doing, which is the Socratian method, to be challenged. I want to bring up one comment that Red Economics made. She said a good rule to use is if you're too comfortable or too right for too long, if I didn't feel challenged or learn something new, that's a pretty good indicator I'm in the comfort zone bubble. And I really think it's a good sign that we like to talk about. We Dave switches channels. I also switch channels, although often, like I say, Fox News starts into some and now the Democrats are canceling this. It's like, dang it, I can't, I just can't take it. But we are trying to hear people we disagree with.
I switch channels and then I end up on C-SPAN because I'm just like, I can't do this anymore, man.
No commentary at all. But I think we do seek and search, and I am willing to have conversations with my friends that I don't agree with, and I am willing to be challenged, and I honestly will listen to them, and they'll roll out this big long thing, and I listen, and then I just go, well, that's one way to look at it. But what about this other way? Another thing I'd like to talk about is if you took 200 of us across all political spectrums, put us on an island, things would probably work out very well for a very long time. And then somebody would figure out a crossbow or something, and we'd all be like, do we think kids should use the crossbow? Maybe everyone shouldn't use the crossbow. Or there'd be a special needs person born. Well, what do we do with the special needs person? Because that person's going to put a lot of demands on that one family. How are we going to help make sure that that family can survive and be adequate, even though they have this child, let's just say, who's blind? It's going to be hard for them to provide for themselves. And you start to get more and more issues. And guess what would happen? As time went on, as say that group of 200 people got to be like, let's say 250 years old, things are going to get really complex because now you've dealt with all these nuanced issues. You got a much bigger crowd. You've had people that didn't want to pitch in for their crops for the winter, and they stood off by themselves, and other people were hungry while these people hoarded their goods. And these people let their kid use the crossbow, and it shot someone else's animal, and it still hasn't been settled. And things get, as a society gets older, I think things also just gets much more complex. And I think we have to be very careful that people don't have this fatalistic view of, well, since we disagree, we're probably better off, something crazy like civil war. Look, we've solved a lot of problems. We all hate pedophiles. We all want some people to have some support from the federal government. We all think murder is bad. I mean, we agree on 99% of things. And the politician's job is to hit us with trans athletes and gun control and Social Security so that they can get reelected. And we have to just sometimes step back and just say, you know what? Your neighbor that's a diehard Republican, maybe even has the Trump flag, you probably agree on 95% of everything. It doesn't make you as different as people want to sell.
To the hundreds of thousands of viewers who watch this show, I'd like to thank you all tonight for being with us. And mostly I'd like to thank Dave for being with us tonight.
Yes.
Dave, I learned a couple things tonight, and I really appreciate that. I learned more than a couple things, but I learned a couple things tonight just about perspective that I'm really glad for. And I thank you for your words about what it's been like to sojourn from a much different vantage point than I've been in over these past few years. And I respect where you're coming from. I really am glad you're with us tonight.
Well, I'm glad I'm here. I really appreciate you bringing me on. And of course, I learned several things too. And I really had a great
Cool.
conversation.
Enjoyed Thank myself. You. And love to have you back sometime and whenever it works out and all that too. Because I think this is what we try to do with this thing is this. I think it's, I've been working, doing a lot of different ways. And I think that, whether it's fish bowling or whatever you want to call it, just modeling the fact that you can do this behavior gives room for people in their own world to apply what we're doing. And so I don't mind being an example and getting beat up and doing some beating up and all the stuff that happens. It's real stuff.
Fantastic.
And there's not enough of this kind of crazy stuff going on,
Yeah.
Yeah. This is what people need to do. This is how you beat confirmation bias.
That's right.
This is it.
That's right.
Yep. So, all right. Yeah. Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you. And we'll be back on Thursday night at 10 o'clock Eastern. And thanks to everybody who's watching. We're going to be really moving over to that YouTube channel now. So we'll still be doing this for the next couple of nights. And then we'll also be on Twitter Live as we go forward as well. So, Jeff, any final words before we cut out?
No, it's good. Dave, you can hang on for a second when we drop. We can wrap up real quick.
We hang off until everybody's gone. So Have a great night, everybody. Thank you. Be safe.
You can share my screen for a second as a to-go screen. I don't know if you saw that.
Oh, yes.
I sent it to the group earlier today.
Daylight savings time.
I just sucked 1 hour of your life away. Tell me, how do you feel? Yeah.
Just sucked 1 hour of your life away.
Does everyone recognize that from Princess Bride with the life-sucking machine?
Heck yeah, dude.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Ace especially felt that tonight. He definitely felt the effects of that 1 hour being sucked off of his life.
Storming the castle.
Yep. Time to storm the castle. That's funny that you referred to that. That's good.
All right, folks. Thanks. Have a great night.